After that insane cliffhanger in Part 1, we're here to break down all the shocking twists and turns of Season 4 Part 2. Reese forces Joe to find someone to frame for the murders and places Simon's severed ear in his freezer. Joe initially plans to frame Connie, a member of the Oxford group who confides his struggles with addiction, but later relents when Connie decides to get clean. At Kate's latest gallery fundraiser, Phoebe is held captive in a hotel room by Dawn, a woman posing as a waitress who has a parasocial obsession with her. Joe negotiates his way into the room and plants Simon's ear in Dawn's bag before the police arrive, thus getting Dawn arrested for the Eat the Rich murders. Nadia, who witnesses the arrest, becomes suspicious of Joe. Adam proposes to Phoebe, but Phoebe, who learned of his financial problems from Dawn, rejects him. Joe and Kate admit their feelings for one another after Kate promises not to inquire into Joe's past. Reese gives Joe a final task: kill his rival political donor Tom Lockwood, Kate's father. Joe accompanies Kate to dinner with her father, who is visiting London. Lockwood reveals he knows Joe's real identity. Lockwood soon gets an article published revealing that Reese fabricated much of his memoir. Reese reveals he has kidnapped Marion and forces Joe to kill Lockwood to save her. Phoebe struggles with PTSD symptoms after her kidnapping. Kate arranges her stay at a clinic, but Phoebe instead decides to marry Adam. Joe prepares to kill Lockwood, but Lockwood instead enlists him to kill Reese, giving him the location of a countryside cottage where Reese has gone into hiding since the publication of the exposé. Joe finds Reese, who claims he doesn't know who Joe is. Joe tortures Reese for Marion's location. Reese pleads his innocence, but Joe ends up killing him, only to then discover that the Reese he has been interacting with has been a figment of his imagination. Nadia, meanwhile, finds a key in Joe's apartment that leads to a room where Marion has been trapped in a glass cage. Joe is revealed to have drugged and kidnapped Marion before she could leave London, and locked her in a glass cage in the basement of an abandoned building across from Reese's favorite restaurant. Joe had been exhaustively researching Reese's life, finding commonalities between Reese's story of rising out of a life of crime and poverty and his own desire for moral redemption. Upon imprisoning Marion, Joe suffered a psychotic break that caused him to dissociate, resulting in gaps in his memory where he kidnapped Marion and later committed the murders. Having forgotten he kidnapped Marion, Joe left her to starve in the cage. The Reese in Joe's visions proclaims himself to be a figment of his darker impulses and helps him remember where he kept the key to Marion's location. Joe arrives at the building at the same time Nadia explains to Marion her plan to help her escape. Nadia manages to hide while a horrified Joe finds Marion and promises to set her free. Joe and Kate attend Adam and Phoebe's wedding party and attempt to convince Phoebe, whose mental state has declined, not to marry Adam. Phoebe is later committed to psychiatric care after suffering a breakdown at the party. Adam is killed by hitmen posing as prostitutes, who, as Kate learns, were sent by her father. She refuses his request to take over his business. Joe takes Phoebe's diazepam to expunge his visions of Reese, but experiences a nightmare in which he sees Gemma, Beck in love, which convinces him the only way to end his obsessive cycle is to kill himself. He awakens to go free Marion, only to find she overdosed on medication he left for her earlier. Believing Marion to have died, Joe disposes of her body at a park to make her look like she overdosed. Nadia, however, tells Edward that she and Marion plotted to fake the latter's death by replacing her medication with beta blockers that lowered her blood pressure so that she could escape. Kate tells Joe that her father revealed himself to have bankrolled her every venture even after their estrangement, and confides her fear of never escaping his control. Joe kills Lockwood and the next morning attempts suicide by jumping off a bridge. However, the police rescue him. He awakens in the hospital to find Kate, who tells him she has inherited all her father's assets and has already covered up Joe's involvement in Reese's death. Joe decides to accept his darker half. He kills Edward and frames Nadia for the crime. Sophie and Princess Blessing buy Sundry House, which Roald and Connie continue to frequent with no signs of change. After rehab, Lady Phoebe moves to Thailand to teach children, while Marion reads an article about Joe while safely home with Juliet back in Paris. Joe moves back to New York City with Kate, who runs her father's business after his death and helps Joe rehabilitate his public image as Love's escaped victim. And if you want to stay tuned for more breakdowns, theories, and recaps of your favorite shows, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts.